Hey YouTube, welcome back. We're gonna try a different kind of video today. We're just gonna play some video games, kill some monsters, and show off this build to you here while we are making some items in Tier 4 dungeon. So tongue-in-cheek, I'm calling this a .eq Aftershock Forge Guard. Obviously, this is not a .eq Aftershock Forge Guard. This is a Forge Strike Forge Guard, and we've been playing it, having a good amount of fun, around 750 or 800 corruption. Some of the bosses hit pretty goddamn hard at 800 corruption, but we're still having a lot of fun killing monsters and dealing a lot of damage to bosses. So, quick and dirty of this build is that we're playing a Forge Guard. We wanted to find out what kind of Forge Guard build we can make and also have it be fun. To me, there's like one Forge Guard build that's interesting right now, which is Shield Bash, because so many of the other things are bugged. So Smelter's Wrath is bugged because this node over here, hit damage per ignite, is uncapped, so that's a bug. Forged weapons are bugged. Manifest Armor is a minion build, and I don't really like minion builds. And Shield Bash is a good build, and I'm glad it got introduced to the game. It scales well with investments, but that's one build. So, you know, I wanted to try out a different Forge Guard build and kind of get a feel for what Forge Guard is doing in patch 1.1. So, that said, there's a person in the community that I've been kind of collaborating with here. You might know him by the name of MasterSword. MasterSword only uses swords, and he only plays Forge Guard, and he only complains every other patch about how bad Forge Guard is. So he's been doing his best on trying to make a good Rive character for Forge Guard, and he's got some good ideas. But instead of just yoinking his idea, I wanted to I wanted to push him in the right direction, and I wanted to see if my brain could come up with something to make him question whether he's doing the right build. You know what I mean? So he's doing a pretty cool thing. He's doing a scrap metal focused build with Rive, with this node over here in Rive, and he's using a Leviathan Carver, which is an absolutely enormous two-handed sword that has negative attack speed. So good luck to him on playing that build and also having fun. We, on the other hand, are playing a very different build. We started out with Rive. We started playing. God, what did we start out with? I think we started out with. Oh, we actually started out with Warpath, Lamau. We started out with Warpath, but we found out that Eye of Reen got changed in patch 1.1, so it no longer works with Warpath. So we are not playing Warpath. But that was the first idea. And then we started using a Plague Dragon's Tongue, PDT. And Plague Dragon's Tongue, it's a spear, which makes you think that it might be bad, but it has a lot of good text on it. So our next idea was, okay, what if we were a Rive build and we were Plague Dragon's Tongue? Because it has 7 flat crit as the implicit. It also has really good melee attack speed. It has a bunch of flat physical damage on it, both the implicit and the explicit, 100 and 100. And then it has a pretty low LP level relative to like other endgame stuff like Leviathan Carver. So you can get this thing with 2 LP if you farm for it. 1 LP is very easy, but 2 LP if you farm for it. So another interesting thing about spears for patch 1.1 with the Forge Guard rework is this weapons master node gives us +5 flat critical strike chance when we are using a spear. So like spears, boring, I hate them. But this one, if you have a 7 implicit, all of a sudden you have 5 is your base critical strike chance for everything in the game, +5 from the Forge Guard skill tree, +7, you have a base crit of 17 before you start worrying about your skills. So like my healing hands is 17, my Forge Strike is 17, 18, 19, 20, 25 with this thing here. And then Vengeance has no crit on it, but we can talk about that a little bit later. It's worth noting that we're also using a Phantom Grip, which has +2 critical strike chance globally, so all your skills get another +2 base. And that is the base of the crit and the weapon choice for this particular build. We want to be attacking fast. Our Vengeance is going to be used for generating mana, and we're basically a mana generator, mana spender playstyle. So we can poke with Vengeance. Remember, Vengeance also has 2 separate damage or reduced damage taken modifiers in it. It also says that things that you riposte cannot crit you, which is neat. So Vengeance is great for generating defense, and it also generates 20% more damage off of this node. That got changed in patch 1.0, maybe? Somewhere thereabouts. I think patch 1.0 is when that changed from increased damage to more damage. And then to top it all off, we have Forge Strike. And Forge Strike is a pretty bonky skill. It's got some good damage multipliers in it, and it even has this detonating ground, which, you know, boom. Most of our damage is physical damage, owing not only to the fact that we're using physical damage skills, but also that our weapon has a bunch of physical damage explicit on it. So you know how adaptive damage works in Last Epoch. You know that some of it is adaptive, some of it is typed, and the typed stuff will never change, even if the skill has a fire tag, for example. So Forge Strike is split between fire and physical damage. So about 75% of our flat damage is physical damage, and then we have more increase or more damage for physical as well coming from this node. What does this mean? We have about 100 untyped damage and 100 typed damage, which means that we are about 75% physical damage and 25% fire damage for our Forge Strike. For our detonating ground down here, detonating ground is fire tag and no physical tag. So it doesn't benefit as much, but it's still a big chunk of damage, and it has a huge more multiplier on it. So we're happy enough to take this. What's kind of interesting, we actually don't have any increases to physical or fire damage. We don't have any fizz pen or fire pen or anything like that. We have a lot of hybrid things with Forge Guard, and it kind of works out. So I'm happy enough to do that. We have hybrid penetration on this first node in the Forge Guard tree. We have hybrid shred coming in from Shield Breaker, procced off of Axe Thrower node in the Sentinel skill tree. And then we even have physical penetration, fire penetration on the Lethal Strikes node. All these nodes are hybrid. So like the fact that, our damage is split, it really doesn't matter very much at all. So that is pretty neat, huh? So we're going to go walk up to tier 4 Julra. I'm going to show you what the single target damage looks like. We're going to talk a little bit about the gearing choices and how we level up this character. I know my gear looks pretty sweet right now. I've got a lot of like end game looking 2 and 3 LP things. But I want to reiterate this to you. When someone plays a build for a long time, you're going to naturally find items that are cool and exciting, and you're going to upgrade your character. So like, if I were only playing this character for like 24 hours and I was showing off really good gear, that's kind of boring, isn't it? But, ooh, nope. It's got the word minion on it. But if I'm playing a build for a long time, like naturally my gear is going to get better and better over time. So I've got more input and ideas for how to build this character that I get to share with you. So, one thing is we were worrying for a long time about like, do we want enough offense? Do we have enough defense? Because like all Sentinels are pretty squishy, but we have defenses coming in from the Vengeance skill tree, from 18% less damage taken here, 25% less damage taken here, 25% less damage taken here. So it's actually 3 separate less damage multipliers, and then increased armor off this bolster node. So it's pretty good. But we were wondering, like, do we want to be Ring of Shields, or do we want to have 40% more damage off of 20%? Whoops, 20% more damage off of the Abyssal Echoes node. It's only 20%. It's not super OP, just OP. So for single target, what we do is we would spec into Abyssal Echoes and we use it like this. I think you only really need Abyssal Echoes on this build if you wanted to be like doing tier 4 Julra, or if you want to do Aberoth. But outside of those 2 scenarios, like these big single target encounters, I really don't think you need the extra damage from Abyssal Echoes. And instead, I would just spec into Ring of Shields. I would take, this armor node on the top left and this extra duration stuff on the bottom right. And then you can use the last 7 points to do whatever you want with, because it doesn't really matter. But here's an example of our tier 4 Julra damage. We're going to flip time zones. We're going to smack them with Abyssal Echoes, which gives us this 20% more damage and attack speed. And then we're going to count to 2 in our head, because if we volatile reversal too fast, we will kill ourselves. So we're going to not do that. Ready? Boop, boop. All right, there we go. So then she's going to bug out and chase us. Boop. Oops. What on earth did I die to? What a beautiful thing to have recorded in the video. Sweet. All right, well, we died, but we're going to keep talking anyways. That's hilarious. So, our tier 4 Julra kill is about 18 to 20 seconds. If you wanted to like trim out of damage, like in other things, like the very beginning of our build is about 30 seconds. But I think even like 25 seconds or 18 seconds is the fastest that we've done, is a pretty good display of what our damage is. We just changed helmets. I'm pretty surprised that just happened, but it is what it is. So we're going to go over to the Divine Era. We're going to go to some dummies and keep talking about this character here. Bucket will do it live. Godly death timing. Yeah, godly death timing. Love to see that in the video. Thanks, Twitch chat. Man, that was a lot of damage too, wasn't it? I wonder what happened. It's worth noting real quick that when you have stun chance on a build like this, we have a ton of stun chance. Things like this and things like Avalanche that generate a whole bunch of extra stun chance. Stun chance is really, really annoying on bosses because it makes them queue up multiple attacks at the same time, and the normal rhythm of the fight kind of gets disrupted. So that's not an excuse, but it is something that I kind of hate. Like, I wish I could just never stun a monster. It'd be better that way. In any case, so that's kind of me rambling about the build here. A couple quick things to note about the character before we kind of dive into it is my tooltip on Forward Strike standing around is 210. We have points in crushing blows. This does not get calculated into my my tooltip numbers, so it's about 15% more damage off of this, even though it doesn't show up there. And then what else matters for you? Note that Phantom Grip gives +2 to minion skills, and Forward Strike is a minion skill. Note that we are a mana generator and mana spender playstyle. So if we have a mana helmet, sorry, if we have, let's go grab this thing real quick. Rive, this one. If we're kind of worrying about where to get extra mana from, having some source of this like tier 6 or tier 7 modifier for mana gained when you use a skill and hit at least one enemy is awesome. So we have some mana generation in the Sentinel skill tree here, but it's nice to have this extra stuff so that you can go through your rotation faster, kill stuff faster, have a smoother playstyle. So if you're Rive, or I guess as an example, if you have like a 1 LP Titan Heart, you want your Titan Heart to have as much life as possible, because as a Forge Guard, you're kind of lacking sources of life. You don't have Vitality scaling like Void Knight does. You don't have Reverence of Duality like Paladin does. You got this node, but it's just not as much as the other classes you get, and you want some source of big life. So Titan Heart plus, you know, tier 6 or tier 7% health is great, but it means you can't get the Vengeance stuff on it. So like a lesser version of this build, like as you're still leveling, as you're still gearing this character up, what you might do instead is not use Vengeance and use Rive instead. You don't need the extra damage reduction from Vengeance when you're, you know, less than 500 corruption or so. And you could use a helmet that has mana gained when you use Rive and hit at least one enemy. It does not need to be a Seed of Echidrosil. It could just be a Leonine Great Helm instead. This base type for Sentinel is insane. It's very, very strong. And if I weren't using any unique item, I would just be using this thing because it's so, so good. So that's a little bit about Rive versus Vengeance in terms of like where the affix is, because your Vengeance affix is here and your Rive affix is there. We talked about the +2 from a Phantom Grip. Other things to note for you are, this is a melee build, so we basically have to use Siphon of Anguish plus Shattered Chains. This gives us Doom applied to the enemy, and remember Doom is enemies take % increased damage. So it's 16% increased melee damage taken. And then Shattered Chain says more melee damage per stack of Doom, stacks up 4 times. So this belt has 20% more damage on it. We'd like to have a 2 LP Shattered Chain because we want something with Cleanse on it as well, but we just don't have Cleanse. So sue me, what do you got? Another thing of note is Code of an Erased Sentinel is the relic Sentinel relic down here. Probably the most impactful addition to the game when all the dust is settled for all the Weaver's Will items. This Sentinel relic is definitely the most popular this is definitely the most popular relic that has Weaver's Will on it, and it's probably the most impactful like game changer across all the Weaver's Will items that have been added to the game. It has +1 skills, % increased armor, and the extra flavor text that it has, the 21% of armor mitigation applies to Dot as well. It's definitely the best when it comes to all of the Weaver relics. So there's some other ones that have like niche, but this is not niche. This is just very generic and very good. So you're looking for one of these with as much melee % increased damage as you can get, because we're pretty low on % increased damage overall. Crit multi, crit chance, obviously that's good as well, but this is Void Cleave hybrid with increased melee damage. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's about it for the important things to talk about there. Let's run through the skills, the mastery, and the gear, and a little bit of like Idol's Blessings at the very end. Use the YouTube chapters. Please skip around, see what's going on. So we are poking things with Vengeance. In the earlier version of this build, we were using Rive instead. So Rive is better if you don't have a 2 LP Titan Heart. I would recommend using a 1 LP Titan Heart with as much health as you can get and then getting a Rive mana generation helmet and just use Rive instead. The damage is about the same. You'll be a little bit squishier, but you'll have more fun because it's a faster playstyle because Rive just attacks faster. So if you were playing Rive, the important things to you would be all the way over to the scrap metal node, pathing through Folk Cleaver. You would grab Savagery. You'd go all the way down for Assassin's Sustenance, and then just a couple points into Concentration for your flat critical strike chance as well. You could take the pull. The pull feels awesome, but it does chew into your mana generation. For our Vengeance, which is primarily what we're poking with to generate mana, poke, 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 poke. We have everything across the top, and basically nothing else matters. So we have 20% more damage, +1 repost, attack speed, riposte to hits cannot crit you, increased armor, less damage taken, and some extra stuff down here, Blade Assault. These are basically style points. You can do with these whatever you want. You could even go Essence of Revenge. It technically helps you as well, but you can do with that whatever you would like to. For our Forward Strike skill tree, what we were doing here was the Detonating Ground all the way on the bottom right side. We're using this for damage. We're not using this for forged weapon stuff. So just Detonating Ground. We have Anvil Blow, which is more physical damage. And remember, because of our PDT, the majority of our damage is physical damage. We have 1 point into more hit damage against rares and bosses. 3-1-1 into less area, but plus 100 crit multi. Some flat crit, some flat crit, all this good stuff over here. And then across the very top, we're no cooldown. So we're spamming this, we're getting our mana back, and we're spamming again. So that is our playstyle there. We are a Sentinel, so we're using Volatile Reversal. Frankly, if you don't like Volatile Reversal, don't play Sentinel. It'll get reworked someday, maybe in patch 1.2. But as of right now, like, I'm done talking about the skill. If you don't want to use it, just don't play Sentinel. Sentinel is really not that good to begin with, especially not without this. We go all the way to the top left, all the way to the bottom right. We have some extra skill points in this coming in from our +1 from a code and +2 from our Nihilus. And we're just grabbing all the points we can to get the attack speed, the movement speed, and the increased damage taken on the enemies stacking twice. For our Healing Hands, it primarily procs off of Vengeance. You could drop Healing Hands and do something else instead. Like you could have Abyssal Echoes in there and also like Lunge or something, but I don't know. It's like, just use Healing Hands. It's a great addition to the game. It's something that just procs all the time, gives you some extra defenses about these nodes, and technically it heals you as well, even though we already have lots and lots of leech. So the most important thing here is the Cleric's Hammers and the melee attack. Everything else is kind of fluff, do whatever you want with it, but the minus mana cost is nice as well. I don't like using Healing Hands movement skill. I feel like it's clunky, but it is strictly better than Lunge because it has an iframe, and an unspec'd Lunge does not have an iframe. So if you like having iframes and slightly clunkier skills, just go ahead and use that instead. I like using Lunge instead. The last skill here is Abyssal Echoes. Abyssal Echoes, I would only ever use this against big monsters like Julra or Aberoth, but we're going to take the blind, the thing that makes it not fall off, and then the percent increased attack speed and damage against blinded enemies. And then, of course, the +2 echoes up here. So after you click Abyssal Echoes, it basically stays on an enemy for about 11 seconds or so. Maybe a little bit longer than that, like 11.5 seconds. So you got lots and lots of uptime as long as this purple icon is up here. And then when it turns off, there we go. And then we can cast it again if we want to have 100% uptime. So that's what that looks like. And then some extra armor shred, I guess. Going through the mastery real quick. A lot of normal looking stuff, but we'll talk about the highlights. We are using the Axe Thrower node. We're mostly physical damage, but we have some fire damage. So Axe Thrower works along with this node in the Forge Guard Mastery, Shield Breaker, giving us Fizz Shred and Fire Shred at the same time. So again, we're just kind of a hybrid build. We don't get to take any nodes in the top because we're using a spear. But on the other hand, we don't have to take any nodes in the top. So this is one of those trade-offs of using a spear as opposed to using something else. In our Void Knight skill tree, if you want Abyssal Echoes, which I think you do, we're going to put 5 and 10 points into here. So 5 points into Abyssal Endurance for some extra res, and 5 points into Leech, I think is what I would opt into. I'm level 97 right now. If I were 98, 99, 100, if I had 3 more points, I would go 1 more point into Crit Multi here, and 2 points into Crit Multi there. In the Paladin skill tree, we want Healing Hands, so just some extra penetration here. In the Forge Guard Mastery, We have all of our points for strength, giving us that +5 crit bonus for using a spear. We've got some extra points into shield breaker. I think 3 points is just about fine. It has a 1-second cooldown, but we attack pretty quickly, so it'll proc. We have some hybrid penetration with Forge Strike, so 20 and 20. And then 5-point bonus for Champion of the Forge. So we are overcapped crit on our, what's this thing called? Forge Strike. But having a little bit extra crit to make sure that Healing Hands and Vengeance crit reliably is nice. But at least 5 points in here just to make sure that we get that crit multi per 2 strength. And we're sitting at about 80, sometimes 90 strength. We have this Crushing Blows, which does not show up in your tooltip, but it's about 15% more damage. This is our Armor Shred. I'd like to have 5 points here. It's actually my only source of Armor Shred, but technically the minions apply Armor Shred as well. So shout out to you, Forge Weapons. Thank you, buddy. We have Life. All of our crit chance here. This is great. And 4 points into Lethal Strikes. If I were level 100, I would finish this off with 6 points. Our dot mitigation comes from these 2 points, 3 and 5 into Liquid Iron. And then at the very top of the tree, we have +2 strength per point, rounding out to +16 strength. So that's pretty neat. For the gear, we already talked about a couple interesting things here. I think your baseline helmet is just like really boring, like, you know, plus mana on one of these 2 pieces of gear, depending on whether you're using Rive or Vengeance. But strength, health, health's pretty good for this build. Strength, health, that's all you're going to see across this character, because we don't need much else. So we have a 2 LP Titanheart. Worked pretty hard on this. Before I got this, I was using Rive instead. We have a Nihilus. This has +2 on it. It's got all positive values, even though they could be better. I guess it has 1% reduced movement speed. Feels bad, man. But something like this, if you weren't going to use a Nihilus, I would just use an Oracle Amulet instead. I think the tier 7% increased critical strike chance is a nice thing to have. You definitely want some crit somewhere on your gear just to make your gameplay nice and consistent. But you could also get that on your gloves. You could get that on a relic if you're lucky enough to have it. You can get that on a ring somewhere. But just getting a little bit of crit. Remember, we're already overcapped on our Forge Strike critical strike chance. So if you don't have tier 7, it's not going to hurt you. It's fine. For the weapon PDT, I think melee attack speed is the thing that you want the most. Getting a 1 LP is very, very easy to do. I would prioritize getting a good implicit with that 6 or 7 melee critical strike chance and getting, you know, good rolls on the melee attack speed and the melee physical damage. So something along those lines. But just as much melee attack speed as possible. It helps you generate mana more, helps you stay consistent, kill enemies, you know, work through your rotation, have more damage uptime, those kinds of things. Let's take a look at our gear once more. Phantom Grip gives +2 to Forge Strike, so it's going to be best in slot for us. Get this with tier 7 strength plus anything else. Doesn't matter what else, but just tier 7 strength, and then 2 minion skills plus 2 flat critical strike chance for yourself. For our Siphon of Anguish, you want tier 7 strength on it. You need endurance somewhere in the build. You can get endurance here. You can get endurance on your gloves. You can get endurance on a 2 LP pair of boots. No, you can't do that. There's no endurance on boots. So really, I guess endurance is a pretty good thing to have somewhere on your rings. So one of these 2 LPs should have endurance on it. So I've got a double tier 6. It looks very good. If I had to choose which modifier would be exalted, I would go like tier 5 strength and tier 7 endurance. I think just like getting more endurance in the build. I've only got 47, but that's the kind of thing that I'd be looking for. For our gloves, we really do lack a lot of flat health. So actually getting tier 7 flat health and like tier 5% increased health, I think is the right thing to be doing here. But the kinds of modifiers you're looking for obviously are melee attack speed, strength, health, crit reduction maybe. So I've got tier 7 crit reduction that I just put on my Decayed Skull. But, you know, if you have a Leonine Great Helm instead, you probably don't need any crit reduction because this thing already goes up to 85%. And a good roll on a helmet means you don't need crit reduction anywhere else in your character. So if you have crit reduction taken care of, don't bother about it here. But I think gloves, strength, yeah, just something like this. But instead of having tier 4 modifiers, you know, have a good pair of gloves instead. Yeah, cool. Good RNG. Of note, critical strike chance does not belong in your gloves. I think you really want those 2 implicits to be melee attack speed and strength. And then if you have space for a 3rd implicit, you could have another source of armor mitigation applies to dot, that extra experimental ethics. I don't think you want critical strike chance here. It's kind of wasted. On our boots, we have no HP on these because we're a very unlucky person. But Sulur on step with melee, or sorry, with movement speed helps your character feel like a real character, which, you know, God bless, love to see that. But I think just like tier 6 or tier 7 movement speed, just like go ahead and play one of those. You'd like to have 2 LP. You'd like to have either vitality or strength or hybrid health on these boots as well. But this is kind of your starting point here. And it almost feels like Sulur on step is kind of sort of exclusive item to Forge Guard. Like Forge Guard, even post the rework, doesn't really have much going for him. But you get a lot of Fizz Res, not only from Liquid Iron, but also from just like, you know, the 35 you get up here. So you'll see in a moment here that for our blessings, we even have a physical res blessing. And like, you know, just use Sularon, get some extra crit multi in your build, and feel pretty good about being melee after all. Our Code of the Erased Sentinel, you want some kind of relevant prefix, but really the reason you're using this is that it has so much good text. +1, increased armor, armor dot applies to damage over time. This is exactly the kind of item you're looking for. Try to get a better one than me. I've only got basically 1 affix on mine. Hopefully yours has 2 or even 3 affixes on yours. For our blessings here, we're looking for a crit multi because we don't need any extra critical strike chance. Again, the only crit chance that we have in the build basically is this tier 7 modifier here, and then everything else comes from our gear and mastery. So just one source of crit chance. We have lightning res from Lagan's blessing. We are not doing crit avoid, we're doing crit reduction, which means we get to use the blessing for all res from Reign of Dragons. And then from can't do it. I gotta go over here. From our Age of Winter blessing, we have that plus Fizz Res we just talked about, and then of course the flat armor from Spirits of Fire there. So that about does it for idols. They're very, very boring. Just health, 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 and then maybe some extra resistances if you're missing Necrotic Res somewhere. But realistically, you're looking for health, 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 health. Because, you know, we have less than 3,000 health. We'd really like to have some health on our boots. We'd really like to have health on these rings. But, you know, at the end of the day, I don't know. It's hard. It's a work in progress build. It's good, I promise. The build's very, very fun to play. If you've been playing different Forge Guard builds, if there's something that you've been enjoying that isn't Shield Bash, I know Shield Bash is good. It's fine. It's very well explored. A lot of people playing it. If you have other Forge Guard builds, especially if they're not minion builds, I would love to hear about it. I think it'd be really fun to share some ideas and see what's going on in the world of Forge Guard. I do think that the Forge Guard Mastery needs another touch-up. Just to share my own personal thoughts real quick. Remember, Shaman got a little bit of a facelift in 1.0, but in 1.1, it got another facelift, and Avalanche got even better and got a new skill tree, and now Shaman's pretty good. So, in my mind, Forge Guard is, right now, where Shaman was during 1.0. Like, Shaman needed 2 facelifts for it to be pretty good, and Forge Guard is 1 patch behind. So, Forge Guard got 1 facelift. I think we're still looking for 1 more. Something that buffs up Smelter's Wrath, something that makes Shield Throw more fun to use, something that makes Ring of Shields do more than almost nothing. Like, I'd like just like 1 more pass on Forge Guard before EHG is finished with it. So hopefully we can get something along those lines. There's a couple questions popping up in Twitch chat, so we can talk about it. Can this build handle 500 plus corruption? Yeah, we can farm about 800 corruption right now. We had some trouble face tanking the boss of the Black Sun at 800 corruption. So you need to engage with that boss fight and avoid mechanics, which is boring. But farming 800 corruption has been fine. We've been doing that for a while now. So this character's pretty cool. Like it. If you got other ideas, let me know about them. We'll put up another video about this build in the future when we polish it off. But I like it. We're using a spear, and it's not a meme. I'm a pretty happy person. I'll see you next time.